We'll dig into all of it with MS Now contributor Inzamam Rashid joining us from Dubai. Also with us, MS Now White House reporter Akayla Gardner, Hagar Shamali, former spokesperson for the U.S. mission to the UN. And here on set with me, Jeff Mason, White House correspondent at Bloomberg. Akayla, I'm going to go first to you because we were talking this morning about the ways in which this speech felt like something that should have happened in the initial days of this war and yet happened now as it stretches into its second month. So how does the White House feel like it went?
Well, you couldn't see this last night, but the room was packed with members of the Trump administration as the president delivered this speech last night. And many of them are calling the president's speech last night powerful. They say it delivered a strong message to Iran, but it left many questions still left unanswered, including whether we could see U.S. boots on the ground and how the U.S. defines eliminating Iran as a nuclear threat. But the president reiterated that he believes this conflict is winding down without offering a clear timeline. I want you to take a listen to him.
I've made clear from the beginning of Operation Epic Fury that we will continue until our objectives are fully achieved. Thanks to the progress we've made, I can say tonight that we are on track to complete all of America's military objectives shortly, very shortly. We're going to hit them extremely hard over the next 2 to 3 weeks. We're going to bring them back to the Stone Ages where they belong.
Now, the president reiterated last night that he also believes that it's other countries' responsibility to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. And we saw more than 40 countries meeting today about that exact objective. But we're learning that the president is expected to meet with the NATO Secretary General next week here in Washington. And that comes after the president threatened in an interview with Reuters to actually pull out of NATO as a result of what he has seen as hesitation to help with the conflict in Iran.
Yeah, certainly that is looming over all of this now as well. Inzamam, talk to us about the latest from the region and how is the Iranian regime responding to Trump's latest threats overnight?
Well, Anna, look, today the U.S. and Israel have ramped up their attacks once again inside Iran. They've struck a century-old medical research center in Tehran. They've also hit a bridge near to the capital, and they've hit several steel plants once again, and this all comes after President Trump's comments last night, his appeal to the nation, essentially updating the U.S. About the situation out here in the Middle East. But Iran has said that it will continue to fight back. They have said that this war will continue until the humiliation and the surrender of its enemies. And it's warned also, once again, against the possibilities of any sort of U.S. ground invasion, which potentially could be a move by the president over the next 2 to 3 weeks as we continue to see more troops arriving to the region. I think Iran is potentially viewing the president's comments in a very different way to what he has said, given the fact that it continues to launch waves of attacks into Israel, but also into its Gulf neighbors as well. Today in Abu Dhabi, we saw the industrial zone was hit by some debris of an Iranian drone which was launched into the country. I was in Abu Dhabi today as well because I've been speaking to someone very senior from the Ministry of Defense here, a senior figure in the UAE military, specifically talking to him about how the UAE has responded to an Iranian bombardment of missiles and drones. We know that ever since this conflict started, the UAE's received more than 2,500 missiles and drones from Iran, disproportionately to the rest of the Gulf, but also Israel as well. And what Iran are saying is that the reason they've targeted the UAE is because they believe that U.S. military bases have been used here to target Iran. I put that specific question to Major General Abdul Nasser of the UAE ministry.
Is the military in the UAE allowing the U.S. to use its military bases here to attack Iran?
I think the UAE government were really clear from the beginning of the conflict that UAE territory will not be used for any attacks against Iran, and will continue to do so. So from a militarily standpoint, that's not correct, and it's not happening.
So a clear denial of that, Ali. One more point as well from this interview, given the fact that Iran continues to strike the Gulf nations, particularly here in the UAE. And the suggestion has been that lately the patience is very much running thin of the Gulf nations. They yet haven't retaliated to Iran. They haven't sought military action to target Iran specifically. But I put that today to this military official and asked him whether they could potentially join this conflict militarily alongside the US and Israel. And he said for right now, the military posture is very much defense, intercepting the missiles and drones that are coming into the UAE. But he left the door open and said that it still potentially is not off the table that the UAE could join in militarily. I think that will come down to what happens over the next 2 to 3 weeks with President Trump and particular Netanyahu and Israel's continued aggression inside Iran. Ali.
Yeah, and this is, of course, why we are so focused on the timeline being put out by the Trump administration. Inzamam, great reporting. Thank you. Hagar, I'm interested when it comes down to 2 or 3 weeks more left to this conflict, the way the president was talking about it last night, what metrics you heard him lay out for success there. It strikes me that Secretary of State Marco Rubio, and you and I have had this conversation on Way Too Early before, seemed like he was shifting the goalposts to things like obliterating the Iranian Navy, for example, doing things with missiles, taking down their missile stockpile, less talk about nuclear, certainly less talk about regime change. And that felt like what popped up in the president's remarks last night. So can you talk about who's setting the expectations here and what the president said?
Sure. He definitely downplayed the goals of regime change. I mean, he said straight out that we're not the ones pursuing regime change. His focus was much more on achieving military and security goals and implying as well, and he has said this already, that he is creating the space for the Iranian people to rise up for the regime change piece. I actually think, and you said this at the beginning, that this kind of speech and address would have been very important at the beginning of the war, because he really actually did explain why we're there. He said, this is a regime that for 47 years has been terrorizing people across the region, has killed so many Americans, either directly or through their proxies, and imagine how bad that would be under, quote, a nuclear shield. So he made it very clear. The goal here is to make sure Iran can never have a nuclear weapon, and that also its ballistic missiles, which were plentiful, that they don't have the ability to threaten the region and elsewhere with those ballistic missiles as well, which the U.S. and Israel have been heavily targeting. So his goal, he really focused it on military and security, and he actually sought to downplay the economic piece. I mean, he said, we don't need Iranian oil, which, by the way, is true. He even tried to make a point about that U.S. oil is for sale. You are seeing, by the way, U.S. oil companies now invest billions in developing their natural gas and oil refinery further because of how things might take shape geopolitically around the world after this. So, yeah, his focus was no nuclear weapon, no ability for the regime to pose a threat, particularly because it would be their terrorist activity would be so much worse if it had a nuclear weapon to protect itself.
I want to stay on the thread of price of oil because gas prices are still on the rise as the energy crisis continues. The price of oil this morning is well over $100 a barrel. I want to play just some of what the president said about that last night. Watch.
Many Americans have been concerned to see the recent rise in gasoline prices here at home. This short-term increase has been entirely the result of the Iranian regime launching deranged terror attacks against commercial oil tankers in neighboring countries that have nothing to do with the conflict. This is yet more proof that Iran can never be trusted with nuclear weapons. They will use them, and they will use them quickly.
So, Jeff, can you talk about the ways that the White House concern is, of course, on what's playing out from a foreign policy perspective, but then the domestic politics around the economy and cost of living are right there next to the way that they are decision-making about this.
100%. I mean, the fact that the gasoline prices are around $4 a gallon right now, that is very politically risky for President Trump going into the midterms because, as you know, we all know, Americans look at their pocketbooks when they're going to the polls. So that's a big deal if the gasoline stays around that price point between now and November. Broadly, what he was doing last night by acknowledging that high price was, I think, giving a little bit of credence to the fact that people are worried about it. But in the same breath, he sort of dismissed it all as well, which is what he's been doing, and also blaming Iran, which, you know, he's probably got some reasons to blame Iran for the attacks that Iran has made. But you can't forget that it was the United States and Israel who launched the war. Yeah. So surely the voters, when they're thinking through this, when they go to the polls in November, again, if prices remain high, will have a reason to draw a line straight back to President Trump, and that is politically risky for him.
I think that is the thing that I have continued to hear from Republican strategists who keep both eyes on the midterms, is that they are willing to give the president a little bit more leeway here because of the faith that he commands from the MAGA base, yes, and because of the ways that there is such a short memory and such a long runway between now and November when voters go to the polls. You know, the other thing, Akayla, and you've got new reporting on this, that I have been wondering about during this conflict is where Vice President J.D. Vance is and what his thinking has been around it. And I know you're starting to answer that question. So talk to us about what you're learning.
Yeah, we are seeing Vice President J.D. Vance take a greater role in what remains to be indirect negotiations between the U.S. and Iran. We're learning that as recently as Tuesday that the vice president was in touch with intermediaries and that he delivered a stern message saying that the president is growing impatient with the progress of negotiations, but that he is open to a ceasefire so long as certain demands from the U.S. are met. But the president said yesterday that if Iran does not reach a deal, he is putting back on the table strikes on electrical power plants. And if that happens, that could lead to a huge humanitarian crisis and, of course, a power outage for millions of Iranians.